Well, hey, everybody. Isn't this a surprise? What's Melanie Potock doing live right now? I'm usually on Monday nights. But I'll tell you what, I was just chatting with my good friend Natalia, and she's over in London right now. And I said, let's just go live and talk about this. So here we are on my Facebook page with my sweet friend Natalia. I can never say your last name, Stasenko.
You did it.
I did it, and I'm a speech therapist. Um, and gosh, Natalia and I have known each other for, I think, like 6 or 7 years when we first started talking, and you were in New York City at the time. And I've followed your work for a long time. And recently, Natalia came out with this very cool, very short, concise, packed with information course all about sugar. And I took it myself because, I'm learning how to feed kids all the time. Been doing this for 20 years, but we're all learning. And I'm not a registered dietitian. And I said, hey, I really want other people to know about this course. So if you happen to be joining us, you're more than welcome to chime in. But I think we're just going to chat for about 20 minutes here and talk a little bit and really get real about sugar and kids, because I know parents stress about it all the time. But before we do, Natalia, I know all about you, but can you just tell our audience a little bit about you and what you do and some of the products that you offer too that I'm such a big fan of?
Thank you so much, Melanie. Well, first of all, I've been learning from you for as long as I remember. So thank you so much for being such an inspiration for all of us who are involved in feeding children at home or professionally or both. As Melanie said, I'm a registered dietitian. I studied to become a dietitian in the US, but I live in London now in the UK. So the time difference can be a little bit tricky when I'm catching up with my US colleagues. So that's why I'm so excited that we found the time to have this conversation with Melanie today. I've been specializing in feeding children and family nutrition for a long time. In the US, I worked with federal programs as a consulting dietitian and also had my private practice. After I moved to London, I focused mainly on online programs and also virtual consulting. So this is something that I've been doing for a while. I recently became a part of a multidisciplinary project called Your Feeding Team, where I'm working together with a counselor and picky eating researcher and feeding a nutritionist and a specialist in sensory food play with children. So there's three of us, and it's a very exciting project. I will try to post some links so you can guys go and check out what I'm doing, but there's a lot of interesting things. And as Melanie said, I'm really trying to come up with very practical, bite-sized products, resources for parents so they can start using immediately and see the improvements in how their children are eating from day one. So that's my passion.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You and I were just chatting before we went live, and I was explaining to you that many people call themselves feeding specialists. And I always joke and say, you know what, your waitress at the restaurant is a feeding specialist. But what you're really looking for is, does that person have the education and the experience to give you the best advice? And do they really understand research backed practice, evidence based practice? That's what parents need to know. And that's what SLPs, OTs, RDs, BCBAs, whoever are helping to feed children, and the list could go on and on of professionals. We really want to focus on evidence-based practice, which of course includes our experience as clinicians. And that's one of the things that I really like about this little mini course that you put together all about sugar. So one of the questions that I always get from parents, and I think it's a reasonable question to ask an SLP, it's a question we talk about parent to parent on the playground when we're hanging out with other moms and dads, is how much sugar is okay? And that's such a broad question, right? Because it varies day to day. Natalia, when a parent asks you how much sugar is okay, how do you typically respond?
Well, as you said, we all rely on evidence in our work as evidence-based practitioners. So I rely on the guidelines by the American Heart Association, which recommends about no more than 5 teaspoons of sugar for children aged 4 to 7, less, about 4 teaspoons, I think, for children younger than that. And children older than 7 can have 6 teaspoons of sugar. At the same time, the American Pediatric Association doesn't recommend any added sugar in kids' diets before they turn 2. So this is a kind of a rough guideline that I'm trying to follow. But then the next question that comes up, how we calculate the sugar and what is added sugar
Yeah.
compared to all the naturally occurring sugar. And that's, I guess, the next big question that we end up discussing with parents. And my point here is to focus mainly on limiting the added sugars, not to worry as much about naturally occurring sugars. Because
Sure.
naturally occurring sugars come in this very nutritious package. For example, dairy products come with calcium and the fat and the protein, all the other good things that kids need. And
Right.
fruit also contains naturally occurring sugar, and that comes packed with nutrients and fiber, which are very beneficial for kids' health.
Well, when I was listening to your course, I'm sorry, I'm throwing just random questions at you. So let me know if you need to look this up, but I think it's just all up here for you. When I was looking at your course, I was really fascinated when you were talking about the difference between the way we talk about added sugars in the UK versus the USA. And I know here in the United States, especially, we're really careful how much juice we want to give kids because we think of juice as just being absorbed straight into the bloodstream. And the reason why I prefer kids not to have a lot of juice in terms of the sugar and the quick absorption is it stops appetite. So if we are going to have juice, I tend to treat it more like a treat. It still might be with the meal because just like you, I like treats to be served with the meals so that they're not put up on a pedestal. Or it might be the occasional treat if we're out at the park and I've thrown a juice box in my bag or whatever. But I was curious, especially since you live over there now, do you see juice boxes the way we do here in the States? Because in the States, they're kind of everywhere.
Absolutely. Juice boxes of everywhere. And parents are just as concerned, and the professionals obviously trying to provide the best guidance they can.
Right.
The difference between the US and the UK approach to juice is that in the UK, actually, sugars, fruit sugars found in juice are considered to be added sugars. So
Oh,
this is the sugar that is actually contributing to the amount of added sugar your child is getting. So it's something that needs to be limited. The US actually has implemented, the American Pediatric Association has implemented a different kind of a guidance on how to limit the sugars coming from fruit juice, because there's a limit on the amount of juice they recommend children should be consuming. So they recommend, the American Pediatric Association recommends no juice for children under 1, and then about 4 or 6 ounces for older kids. So the amount increases slightly as kids grow up, but ultimately they recommend to consume no more than 1 serving of fruit juice a day and no more fruit juice for very young children. So there is this kind of desire to limit it in both countries. It's just that in the UK, I think they took it one step further and limited and included it with all the other added sugars.
so
Yeah.
well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So you're making me think about fruit purees. How does that apply to what you're saying, UK versus United States?
It's the same. Fruit purees is not considered to be added sugar because fruit puree comes in a more nutritious package. It all depends how sugar is delivered with all the other things. I
Right.
wanted to add one thing. In the US, concentrated, and in US and in the UK, I should say, concentrated fruit juice is considered to be added sugar. So when we look at the packaging of the product and we say concentrated apple juice or concentrated grape juice there in the list of the ingredients, this is added sugar. And on the label, it should be labeled as the certain certain number of grams of added sugar.
That's really good to know. You know what? I'm taking a second to just type in. Do you have any questions for us, for our listeners? Because, oh my goodness, we've already had a lot of people join us, and they can just type their questions into the comments and we'll answer them in a second. And I'll put them up on the screen too. So That is fascinating to me. And of course, it makes sense because we often see differences in the way food is labeled, as well as, of course, just the way oftentimes food is presented. So that brings me to, since we're talking about fruit purees and the way food is presented, are you seeing all the pouches over there as well?
Oh, yes, sadly. Yes, definitely. But I believe there is more awareness about how pouches should be approached. Well, as you know, you and I, we've spoken about this to media and on our websites forever about how pouches taste sweet.
Right.
Most of pouches out there taste sweet, and so I think it's probably one of the biggest disadvantages of using pouches consistently, that there is not enough exposure to flavors. And actually, when I talk to parents about sugar, whichever sugar it is, added sugar or naturally occurring sugar, I try to frame it in a way of balancing the flavors in a child's diet. So although, for example, the product doesn't have added sugar, but it's naturally sweet, it should be balanced with something savory. So we cannot just keep giving kids a lot of sweet tasting food that is healthy because it doesn't have added sugars, because it will not help to develop their palates in an appropriate way. So it's all about balance of different flavors as well, not only focusing on the grams of added sugar they're getting and trying to limit it.
Boy, that's such good advice, really good advice. Because often when you do see pouches, they might say that they include kale, but kale's like the fifth ingredient,
I
and they're
know.
still very, very sweet. And you and I know that children from birth are programmed to really like sweet, but we have that beautiful time of a flavor window in infancy through toddlerhood. Well, young toddlerhood, to really introduce more savory flavors. So we get, as you just said, that balanced palate that is so important. Well, okay. So when we're talking about sugar, and we're talking about things like juice, we're talking about even the natural sugars occurring in fruit, et cetera, but then all put into a pouch, and having that sort of packaging. I think what I want everyone to know who's listening is pouches aren't a bad thing. Sugar's not a bad thing. Juice is not a bad thing. I don't really think there are bad foods unless they're toxic, or we just need to throw them out and they're bad leftovers. Those are bad foods. Those are going to give you a tummy ache. I'm talking about really understanding, or having our children understand that food all food is good. And it's about balance, as you said, and it's about being together as a family. And it's about really loving food, which is what we do when we work with our extreme picky eaters, or any picky eater, as a matter of fact, any child, is help them get to a place where they love all sorts of food. It's about variety and that balance, as you were saying. So I love that. I love that. So I have one last question before we see if there's any questions from our audience today. And I was wondering, what happens if a kid just gets too much sugar? Of course, Halloween is what always comes to my mind. What really happens to a kid if they just, sometimes holidays come our way, or birthday parties or whatever, and they get a whole lot of sugar? I mean, is that really a bad thing if there's no underlying medical issue like type 1 diabetes or something like that? Is that really a bad thing? Isn't it more about making sure that they don't get too much sugar on a daily basis? Or do we really have to worry about these big sugary events?
Great question. I actually think that these big sugar events are fantastic learning opportunities.
Really?
Each child needs to understand how to feel satisfied around those foods. They need to know that they will be able to reach this satisfaction point before they will be able to moderate it for themselves.
Yeah.
So if they're constantly restricted, if there's constant scarcity around those foods, they will never learn the moderation, because moderation comes from feeling satisfied
Mm-hmm.
when eating something. This is when we are truly at the place when we relax around that food. I'm not saying that they should be just eating sugar every day, nothing else. But I try to invite parents to view those opportunities as learning, kids learning to overeat,
Yeah.
to experience maybe some digestive discomfort, to really feel yucky And it's not our fault as parents. How great is that? They're just learning from their own mistakes, right? So I think it's good for them to have these opportunities. Sometimes they occur naturally, like holidays, like Halloween or Christmas or birthday parties. But I also encourage parents to sometimes create them specifically in cases when children seem to be obsessed with a specific type of food, when they cannot stop talking about chocolate, when they keep asking about lollipops every day and they just don't know how to react to that. So there is these opportunities when they can truly get their feel. And in the course, I describe exactly how and when they should be structured. But overall, it can be something nice, like baking cookies together and eating as
Yeah.
many as you want, or purchasing some food that the kids keep asking for and just putting it on the table and letting them have all of that. So there's no harm in kids eating a lot of sugar from time to time. However, there are special conditions like diabetes or ADHD where certain symptoms may be exacerbated by eating too much sugar. We should be just prepared for that and educate ourselves as parents, and also educate other parents about this possibility.
That's such good advice. I that is very, very creative. And yeah, maybe just to kind of set them up for some of those opportunities rather than waiting for Halloween, every once in a while. And it's okay. I mean, oh my goodness, I'm guilty of eating too many cookies after I've baked a batch. We all have. And then we're a little more careful next time. But you're right, it's a learning opportunity. I like that. Thank you. Hey, let's put a question up here. And Angie has a good question for us. She said, would an example of sweet and savory be like apple with peanut butter?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything savory, or apple and cheddar cheese,
Oh,
or something. I think each snack. We're probably talking about snacks right now. So if all snacks taste sweet, and all dinners are more like veg, potato, and protein type of food, kids will be naturally drawn towards snacks and snacky foods. So I encourage actually keeping snacks quite balanced in terms of their flavor profile, and offering different flavors as well as different textures. So that would be a great example of a combination of flavors.
I love what you just said there about keeping snacks also balanced, because so often we think of snacks as anything prepackaged in the snack aisle at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be, as Angie just pointed out, it could be a couple apple slices and some peanut butter or cheddar cheese, as you mentioned. That can still be a snack. It's just that snacks are small. Snacks are small, meals we have more. So I like that. Very good. Angie also has another really good question here, as does Amber here in just a minute. Angie says, which ingredients as a parent should we truly avoid? Is there anything we really want to be careful of?
Which ingredients overall in the whole food supply? Okay, so it's a difficult question, because I think some of the answers will be rooted in our beliefs as parents, rather than what I, as an expert, will be sharing here with you.
Sure.
Well, there is no unsafe ingredients in the US food supply. We have FDA, USDA, who take good care of their citizens. Now, some people may think that they should avoid all conventional produce because growing organic food is better for the earth. And I cannot disagree with that, definitely. So then the value of that specific family, one of their values will be to purchase organic produce and spend more money on it, which is absolutely fair. Then there's somebody who will say they want to be vegan because that's their belief. Maybe it's based on health reasons, maybe it's based on some ethical reasoning. And again, I cannot take it away from them. I will support them in a way so that they can get all their nutrients and feed their children appropriately, even if they maintain a vegan lifestyle. So I cannot say that there is an ingredient in our food supply in the US or UK that is harmful for health. It's all about balance and moderation. Eating only baby carrots for a month will kill somebody for sure, because they will probably over consume certain nutrients overall. So it's
Wow.
all about balance. and consuming a varied diet with a lot of fruit and vegetables in it, and not worrying about smaller things or scary reports that we are getting in the media sometimes, sadly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, speaking of balance, I'm going to let you balance your work life with your family life because I know you have children to go pick up. So I'm going to let you go now. But this is kind of fun to just do this last minute, and I'm glad so many people
It's
jumped
fantastic.
on. And then if you get a minute and you want to just go back and include some of the links to your resources in the comments when you have a minute to do so, I hope you will. And thanks so much. It's good to see you.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much, Melanie.
All righty. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.